California has become really unaffordable. Where are my kids going to live? We pride ourselves on it being such a great economy in California, which is fueled by the opportunities that are academic institutions. But if your talent can't find a place to call home, they're going to take their talent and their skills somewhere else. And that is the largest threat to the future success of California.
My guest today is Assemblymember David Alvarez. David will discuss his concerns with housing affordability in San Diego, California. He will also discuss his path of becoming a lawmaker, coming from a poor neighborhood in San Diego.
My parents never owned a home. I'm the first one, obviously, in our family to go to college. And so that college opportunity afforded me this opportunity to have a middle-class lifestyle with a home ownership. But it's something that is no longer really feeling like a reality for a lot of people.
I'm Siyamak. Welcome to California Insider. David, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be with you.
So we're in your office. We're in Chula Vista, San Diego. One of the things that this community faces is housing, and not just Chula Vista, it's in San Diego, and San Diego is getting really unaffordable. And then it comes across the state.
That's right.
And you're an assembly member. You've been introducing some bills on this. Can you tell us what's happening?
Yeah, this issue comes from me talking to people, whether it's the people at the coffee shop or the breweries here on 3rd Avenue, right outside the doors of my office here in Chula Vista, or in Barrio Logan, community where I grew up in, which was a very, very poor community for many, many decades. And it's become unaffordable everywhere in California. You talk about rural areas of California. Now in my role as a state assembly member, I get to talk with colleagues who are assembly members from every corner of the state of California. This is an issue that's impacting everybody. As we talk to real people about this, whether it's at the corner store, the coffee shop, when you go out to do grocery shopping, or when you're knocking on doors talking to voters, the issue that keeps coming up is California has become really unaffordable, and where are my kids going to live? All those who have family, those of us who have kids, I think about that too now. I've got 2 kids of my own, and I certainly hope that they get to live this amazing California life that I've had with amazing opportunities. The truth is that won't happen if they don't have a place where they can afford to live. And California is becoming a place where even college-educated individuals cannot afford to stay here. We pride ourselves on it being such a great economy in California, which is fueled by the opportunities that our academic institutions, our public universities primarily, have created these opportunities for people. And those are really great things. But if your talent can't find a place to call home, they're going to take their talent and their skills somewhere else. And that is the largest threat to the future success of California. So that is why the issue matters so much to me. My parents never owned a home. I'm the first one, obviously, in our family to go to college. And so that college opportunity afforded me this opportunity to have a middle-class lifestyle with a home ownership. But it's something that is no longer really feeling like a reality for a lot of people. Yeah, I've introduced several laws every year, many of which have been signed by the governor to try and tackle this problem, from making it more affordable to build, to streamlining the process that is the environmental review process so that it doesn't delay the building of housing. Those are all laws that I've worked on, and a few others to try and make housing more attainable for everybody.
It's not just your community. You've been talking to other people from different communities, and some people say it's because there's not enough land and we're next to the ocean. There's different arguments. What is the root cause of this housing being a lot more expensive than the rest of the country?
So people want to live in California, and we haven't necessarily kept up with that demand. Again, our universities attract talent from all over the world, from all over the country and all over the world. And those students who come here want to stay here. And they are more competitive. They have obviously better skills, which means they have better jobs, better paying jobs. And so the more pay you have, the more you can afford to buy a home, which means those in the service economy or those who are lower middle class, then the compression is felt and it becomes more unaffordable to them because we do not have the number of units that need to be built. I just want to point out and recall when Governor Newsom took office in 2018, he called for 3 million homes by the year 2030, which is what really California needed. Or you looked at the Independent Legislative Analyst Office, they talk about the millions of homes that are needed to meet the demand in California. We are not on track to meet either Governor Newsom's expected goal or the Independent Legislative Analyst Office's goal, or really a lot of cities' own goals that they've created because they've identified as a need in their own cities, we are not on track to do that. And so we have to make it easier. Those are some of the laws that I've helped to pass. We need to make it more attractive to developers. I always like to say this, government doesn't build housing. The private sector is what builds housing. The more difficult you make it for the private sector to build housing, the less likely they are to build more housing. And so we need to eliminate more red tape. You're talking about, is there more land? We know that in urban communities, like big cities of San Diego and even some of our larger cities like Chula Vista and most of the cities that I represent actually are quite urbanized. There really isn't that much more land available. And so our future development and our future growth is through infill, which means you identify areas where you can grow and build taller buildings to allow more people to live. And there's parts of cities and communities where that makes absolute sense. There are other parts perhaps where that doesn't make as much sense. But what we've been doing is passing laws to make it easier for developers to build in those areas where it does make sense, that denser or taller buildings, so you can try to provide housing opportunities for more people in those areas. And those are some of the things and some of the reasons, some of the ways in which we are trying to solve the housing crisis.
And do you get pushback from the cities when is it challenging to?
It depends. So I'm lucky enough that I represent cities in San Diego that have really tried to do their part, whether it's Chula Vista, who's grown tremendously, City of San Diego that has passed policies to allow infill urban development, National City, a very working class community which has also done its part in building housing down by the border in San Isidro, Tai Mesa. I represent some pretty good communities that have acknowledged that this is a problem and that they need to be part of the solution. Throughout the state, though, you do run into cities that just don't want to change the way they are. You find this a lot in more affluent communities. You find this a lot in the areas in the coast part of California. They love their views of the ocean and lack of neighbors around them, and they want to keep things that way. And so I've had a law, this actually was a proposal that did not become a law, to try and incentivize and allow for more development of more housing along the coast, these more elite, expensive areas of California, where we would allow more housing to be built in exchange of the developer, the builder, building more affordable housing on that same site. We were not successful with that law. There's still parts of California that resist, that push back, that don't want to see things change. And the truth is that California has only thrived because of its growth in its industries, and industries only grow when you have more people to work in those jobs. And so we want to continue to be successful. That growth must continue.
Now, about affordable housing, how does the model work? So you guys, is the state trying to get, I know that each portion of a building that's built should be affordable. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about the affordable housing?
Yeah, so the way I've approached this is through proven incentives, so that if you have a piece of land where you can, let's just try to use some basic math, you can build 100 units today, because the city already said on that land you can build 100 units, no matter who you are. If you want to build 100, you can build up to 100. And that might sound like a large number, but there's places in cities where that's the number. You could even, let's just bring it down to 10. Let's say you have a piece of land where the city said you can build up to 10 units. The laws and the incentives that I've worked on has said, okay, if you developer build some of those units to be for people who are low income, and then I passed a law that said, or for people who are middle class or middle income, then not only can you build your 10 units, but you can build double the number of, so you can build up to 20 units, but you have to keep some of those affordable for people who are low income and for people who are middle class, middle income. So that gives the developer the incentive to say, okay, it's going to cost me more to build these units that are going to be affordable because I can't charge the normal rent, but I'm going to be able to build a few more units where I can bill and charge the rent that is the market rate, and I'll recoup my costs by having those people pay the market rate, and I'll keep those prices low for 55 years or longer for low income and middle class families, to keep the access or the cost of that housing at a much significant lower cost than what it costs for the person who lives in a market rate unit. So those are the types of incentives that we're working on.
Now, David, in terms of, you mentioned rents, and one of the questions that has come to mind is that a lot of these new developments are rentals. Mm-hmm. Is there a reason for that?
It's really interesting that you bring this up, because this is a conversation for the last 2 years that I've been having with a lot of people and a lot of my colleagues who are lawmakers and assembly members and senators, who are pro-housing, but we also are missing that important aspect of home ownership and first-time home ownership. That is still a conundrum. That is still something that we haven't been able to really resolve at the state level. Now, we are hearing presidential candidates and national candidates where there is a lot more that can be done from a federal level talking about housing. Honestly, for the first time in a serious way that I can remember, at least in my lifetime of being involved in politics, that presidential candidates have housing not just as like a bullet point that they just mentioned, but as a platform with some ideas on how to create home ownership opportunities. That's going to be really helpful because there are federal incentives, there's programs that the federal government can run to help people buy their first home and buy a home. In California, we've tried this. We put over $350 million just a couple years ago for first-time home ownership opportunities. That money went like that because there was such a demand. So we know that people want to get into these housing opportunities. We don't have the money to continue to do that and sustain that. That's where the federal government can really come in and play. In addition to that, we can incentivize through the laws of how we allow things to get built to allow those who are providing home ownership as a product to also get some benefits of reduction of time, reduction of costs, and things like that. And those are the ideas that I'm literally, as we speak, trying to look through and trying to analyze and research more of.
So if you build to sell instead of build to rent.
You could get some incentives. You can, we make it easier for you. We've got to figure that out because we have to create those opportunities. The entry into the middle class is really, home ownership is really, really key.
David, you have a very interesting background. You actually got involved in public service, but you were the first one in your family to graduate from high school.
Yeah.
Right? Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, and this might go kind of long because I think I want to share with you how I got to where I am. My parents were immigrants to this country. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. I'm the youngest of 6. They came to this country with that American dream, that work ethic, wanting to work hard and just make a better life for their family. So I had that opportunity to be able to my parents didn't even have a first grade education. So education is incredibly important for me. It is what opened all the doors of opportunity, and it is why I am a big proponent of that work. And the work that I do in Sacramento is focused on education. But I actually studied psychology. I never took a political science class or a government class besides the ones you have to take in order to graduate. My degree was in psychology because I really wanted to work with young people. As I was growing up very, very poor, my parents had minimum wage jobs. We grew up in a community that in the 80s and 90s was very difficult. It was a very poor community, Barrio Logan, where less than 1% of the people who lived there had a high school graduation, had a high school diploma, much less college education. A lot of my friends and a lot of people, my family included, spent time in prison, involved with gangs. And so to have been able to have the opportunities I did really is because of the education that I had. And so in reflection of that, I thought I wanted to work in education, and I began as a math major and took a couple calculus courses. I love math, and I thought, well, I can teach other kids math and work in schools. And then I found psychology, and I realized, well, I could make an impact in people's lives working in psychology, maybe being a counselor in schools. So that's what my degree is in. I graduated with a bachelor's in that, and I went to work in social work and case management, trying to work with families out of college.
Right out of college.
Right out of college, I started to work with male involvement program with fathers who had children in the preschool system and who had different struggles in their lives. And so I did case management. We held support groups for parents and obviously did referrals to therapy sessions and all of those things. It was really rewarding work, but it also felt like it wasn't really what I wanted to do in life. So at that moment, I started to apply to graduate programs, to master's programs, and I started to fill out applications. And I came across a program, which is a program called the Capital Fellows Program in Sacramento. It kind of caught my attention, so I applied to it, not thinking really that I'd have an opportunity or a chance to actually get selected. I did. I was one of 18 fellows selected to be in the executive branch. We also have 18 in the Assembly and 18 in the Senate. It's a really important program in Sacramento that's really created a pipeline for people who work in public service. And it certainly was that experience and that experience alone that made me realize I can make an impact in people's lives in government. And that's how I started my journey in government. So I went to Sacramento for a year. I had never left home. I was born and raised and studied my university studies here in San Diego. I even lived at home. I didn't even live on campus when I went to San Diego State. So I was very sheltered, to be honest. But I went to Sacramento for a year and I learned about government and how it works. And again, I saw, wow, you can make an impact in people's lives. But I want to be back home. So I came back to San Diego and I started working on campaigns. And then I got to work for a state senator Denise Ducheney, who's my mentor. She was someone who taught me about working with other people and incredible institution in the history of the legislature in California. Worked for her for 5 years, and then I decided I wanted to run for office locally, and so I ran for city council in an election which I was not expected to win. And I just did a lot of work knocking on doors and talking to people about things that matter to them. At that point, I had my daughter was born, and so it was very personal about, okay, I was able to buy a house because I got married, and I said, in my own neighborhood where I grew up, and I said, how can I make a difference? You know, this is going to be like my future is right here, and there's a lot of things wrong happening in my neighborhood and in my city. So I ran for city council, was not the favorite at all to win, and I ended up winning that seat and got elected, and I served for 2 full terms on the city council in San Diego until I turned out of office. And then I left office in 2018. I had planned to run for another political office, in fact, at that point, but I also had an experience in a lot of self-reflection. I did a retreat of 8 days of silence with the Jesuit order of the priests in the Catholic faith. I went down to Jalisco to do this retreat in a little town called Puente Grande, Jalisco. It's where
8 days of silence.
8 days of silence, yeah. Prayer and meditation, but silence. And at that point, I realized that I didn't want to continue in politics. I had given 8 years of my life, like daily almost, to this, and it was a lot. By then, I also had a second child. My son had been born. I kind of just felt like I needed to dedicate that part of my life, or the next phase of my life, to my family, and I needed to take a break from the politics of it, and I did, and it was a very healthy break. And at that point, also in that reflection, I was just so grateful for what I had experienced, having been son of immigrants, parents, again, no education, and to have been able to rise to be leading the 8th largest city in the country as a council member representing the community that I grew up in, it just left me with such a great sentiment of happiness and joy, and I kind of wanted to just savor that forever. And we accomplished a lot. We built libraries in places that deserve them, that had not been built, fire stations and parks and the things that people care about in their neighborhood. And I felt like, okay, well, that's great. Like, I've done it. It's good, and I don't need to do anything. I don't need to prove anything to anyone else. So I stepped away for 4 years. This is getting really, really long, I know. But that's when, after 4 years, the spiritual exercises, St. Ignatius really teach you to do a lot of reflection. And in 2022, there was an opportunity to run for this office that I hold now. I spent time praying about it a lot. By that point, my dad, who had lived with us, had also passed away, so I lost my second parent. And there was a lot of reflection among that as well, because of all the sacrifices made and the hard work. And I remember thinking in my prayer, like, is this really it? Like, is this all that my parents worked for, that I had to contribute to life and to the world? And in reflection, I was like, I'm a public servant. Like, this is really who I am, and I need to embrace it and not really pretend like I don't need to go back. I also had this like negative sentiment about politicians, which is weird because I'm a politician, that they just hold on to things for too long and they want to be elected for office just to be elected. And I just didn't want to be one of those. And then I realized in my prayer and reflection,
Like the career long.
yeah, like, go and do something else, or like, I don't know, like, I just didn't want to be that. I wanted to be different. Then I realized public service is a calling, and like, I really feel called to do it, and I think I can do a good job. So I decided to run. And again, when I ran for this position, I definitely was not the favorite. I definitely started as the underdog and worked really hard and ended up getting elected. And here I am. That's the long version of the story.
That's a great story. And what is it like to be in this place of serving the public?
It's a tremendous honor, which that phrase and that description gets used, I think, too loosely and maybe is underappreciated by the public when some of us say that have this opportunity to say that. It is an honor. It's also a great responsibility. I feel like I have to accomplish a lot because, especially for the communities that I represent, that I feel like they've been left behind for too long and kind of not really the focus or attention of our state. As an example, we have a region with over 500,000 people, and we don't have an institution of higher education. We don't have a university in our community. Whereas any other region, they have more than one in some instances. And so bringing a university to this district that I represent is one of my major initiatives. And that doesn't happen overnight, and it's not easy. And then I have the unique responsibility of being a border representative in state government, mind you, not federal, but in state government, where our region is very dynamic. We have 170,000 plus people who cross the border every single day through my district. Most of them to work because they can no longer afford to live in San Diego. They live in Tijuana or Rosarito or Playas or Tecate or somewhere down south of the border. And that is an integrated economy that unfortunately in rhetoric, political rhetoric, just gets lost. This is a reality that's a good thing that's happening in our own backyard. And so I have that responsibility that I feel we need to continue to uplift and to remind people of how important it is for us to be the number one trading partner in California with Mexico, because we depend on that economy and we have jobs that get created because of that. So those are all the responsibilities that I feel. And I also have two kids, right, that are still a high schooler now and an elementary school student who I want this to be a better region, a better state for, and that drives me for sure.
You mentioned that you had a negative perception of being a politician.
Yeah.
Why would you have a negative perception of it? Is there
Well,
something?
There's cultural context to that too. My parents come from Mexico. There's been a history of Mexico of politics, of corruption, and a lot of those negative connotations towards politics. So there's cultural things that I bring with me that are long before me, and that was one reason. Second, I do think there are people who enjoy, honestly, the title and the spotlight, and and that's the focus. And then there's a lot of others that want to get work done. And so I just try to associate myself with colleagues and other politicians that are just focused on getting things done for the communities that they represent. And there's a lot of those too. But that was sort of the sentiments that I brought to this. And I have seen a lot of politicians be around for a long time and not really get a lot done. And so when I talk about me having that reflection of saying, well, I had my time, I did my 8 years, we did get things done, I should be proud of that and good with that. And I definitely was proud of that, definitely feel good about that. But I also feel like, okay, I can give a little bit more. And as long as that's the driver for me in the work that I do, then I'm going to be excited to continue to do this work. If it ever really no longer becomes enjoyable in that way, then it's probably not the right place for me to be.
Now, does it take some level of sacrifice, and what are those?
The only sacrifice now is it's no longer the people who disagree with you. I've actually come to a point where very honestly and truly, I can respect you if you completely disagree with me, and I'm okay with that, and I don't have to argue with you to convince you otherwise. And so there's a lot of people who get very emotional about things when they disagree with you, and they sometimes personalize that. And I can get past all of that. None of that actually bothers me. I can respect that you're coming from a different perspective. The real challenge for me in this work is more of a personal challenge. It's more of the work that I have to go do when I travel to Sacramento on Monday, leaving my family here, my wife and my kids, and go to Sacramento on Monday and come back on Thursday, which means for almost 4 days of the week, I'm away from my family from January through essentially September. That's the way that the legislative calendar works, and my job in Sacramento in voting on laws requires me to do that. So that is by far the most difficult challenge, and trying to then be very intentional about not spending after hour time away from my family. So trying to work while they're at school or at their activities, which don't require me to be present, but always trying to be present at the activities where I can be present, whether it's, soccer or Little League or volleyball or all the activities that my kids like to do. I want to be there. And this job, sometimes the expectations are that you do this 24/7. And I could see that, and I can see why the expectation is, but I can also tell you that if you're focused and if you are goal-oriented and driven, you can accomplish things respecting that time that you need to be with your loved ones in particular. And for me, that's the biggest sacrifice that I make. And that's the one that I have to work the hardest for.
Now, is there any moments that makes it worth it?
Oh, absolutely. It is still a really amazing opportunity for someone like me, where I came from, to be able to be writing laws for the state of California, where just roughly 30 years ago, we had people in government writing laws against people like me and my family, with Proposition 187, for example, which would have limited educational opportunities for undocumented immigrants. My parents were undocumented at some point. My brothers and sister were undocumented at some point. So that was very much a very personal, impactful. Laws were being written to hurt my own family. And now I get to be in the seat writing laws to make sure that we treat everybody fairly and that we treat people equally. And that is an amazing opportunity that makes the job just really rewarding. And then solving real problems, like trying to solve housing problems and seeing that the laws that you pass, people are now using them and saying, because of that law, I can build more housing. Or because of that law, now we can provide more education. Those are the things that are really rewarding. And again, as long as that continues to be the outcome of what I do, we will continue to enjoy the work that we do as an assembly member.
For younger people that kind of take a look at public service, do you have any thoughts for them about serving the public? Is this something you recommend, and why would you recommend it?
I absolutely recommend any young person to at least give it a try, to see if it's what your passion is. That is why I have really robust internship programs in my office. Every time I've been in elected office, create really robust internship opportunities, because I know I wouldn't have had this career path were it not for the fellowship, which is a type of internship that showed me that this is something that could be what I could do in the future. So I am very, very a strong believer of young people giving it a try. I still have a lot of faith in our democracy. I also believe that ideas from young people, innovation comes from new voices, and that's important. Just as much as someone that's seasoned and experienced and who has been around a long time is important, new ideas and challenging status quos are also important. And understanding how to do that within a system of government, within a system of governance, is critical for the future success of our state and of our nation.
Assemblymember David Alvarez, it was great to have you on California Insider.
Thank you. Appreciate it.